knowing the NBL, for me, it was a lot about the why. First and foremost, I get a lot of energy from those bigger growth opportunities.
Very happy to welcome David Stevenson. He's the CEO of the National Basketball League here in Australia and New Zealand. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Sean. It's a real pleasure to be on here. I've valued the work that you've done in the industry for many years, and so thank you very much for having me on.
I appreciate the kind words. I always get started by trying to figure out people's sports business origin story. What about yourself? How did you find your way into the world of sports business?
Yeah, look, I think like most people growing up in Australia, had a passion to be able to play sport and played lots of sports along the way, and was fortunate enough to represent Australia in volleyball, and that was a bit of a dream to be able to play for Australia. Unfortunately, I didn't get to the Olympics. I got close, but not close enough. But really that parlayed into a business and sport together, and I thought that could be a perfect career. So it started off in a very small place called Foot Locker in Eastland, in Ringwood, in Melbourne, where I'm from. Started there when I was 15, getting $4.95 an hour. And that was really the start of trying to combine sport and business. And then fortunate enough to be able to have a career that's been focused on sport and business.
I mean, looking back at your story and being at a Foot Locker reminded me, I was a massive basketball fan and played basketball when I was a youngster, and we lived in regional Victoria. And just to show you the fandom, we used to plan basketball store crawls. And so we would plan our trip to Melbourne, getting trams up to Preston, down to the Rebel at South Yarra, up to Preston to see the guys at Fast Break, just to get NBA jerseys and the latest shoes. So very much similar backgrounds, at least in loving their sport and loving their sneakers. But that obviously, then you had a necktie and a long career at Nike. Tell us about that.
Yeah, thanks much, Sean. Again, I love hearing your story. I think everyone's got a pretty cool connection to sport. Look, I was very fortunate at 21. I was studying full-time, as I said, trying to play volleyball for Australia and working at Foot Locker running a store. And then saw an advertisement in the paper that Nike were going to open a Nike town in the city of Burke and Swanston, and thought, wow, wouldn't it be a great way to get into that amazing company? And I think they had hundreds and hundreds of applicants, as you could imagine. But through my sister's friend in Sydney who knew someone who worked at Nike, and I was able to track that person down. His name was Steve Unane, and he was responsible for running the store, and said, hey, can I come and have a coffee with you? And funny enough, ended up getting a job. So I was the assistant head coach, which is basically the assistant store manager at Nike. And I can't speak more highly enough of the culture and incredible success that Nike's experienced. And I was fortunate enough to give me a chance on the shop floor, and then had a pretty amazing journey over 17 years, progressing from retail initially, became a sales rep, moved pretty quickly through to be national sales manager for equipment, and then national sales manager for footwear, and then eventually sales director at 27 years old. And again, I just think not many companies will give a young person that kind of chance to progress. And obviously you work hard and you've got to deliver results, but they're a phenomenal company. And so end up being sales and then become retail director as well. And moved overseas to Hong Kong, running an Asia Pacific apparel business, which is a pretty big shift, from Australia, New Zealand, where you knew the market well, you knew all the shopping centres, you knew the retailers, to then looking after 35 countries, many of which I'd never been to, and different cultures and languages and business models. So it was a great experience, and obviously life of living in Hong Kong. Then went through the GFC in 2009 and moved into, I think, one of the most amazing roles at Nike, which was running the commercial business for global football, so for soccer, and to be able to play an important role in World Cups, and such a great passion that people have for the sport of football, or soccer as we would call it, was a phenomenal opportunity in a global role. That was supposed to be in
so
Portland.
Was that just
to
put your pause on that? Sorry to interrupt, but we going overseas, going to Hong Kong and looking at different markets, was that something that you wanted to do? Was that on your path and saying, hey, I want to get a broader international experience, or was it more so the opportunities afforded in Nike, and you're like, well, that's an opportunity I really can't turn down, or it's something I really want to tackle? Which one was it?
It was probably a little bit of, firstly, the life experience to be able to go and live overseas. And we've come from a family of travelers. And so that was important. But two, I think as you progress through the roles in Nike in Australia and New Zealand, it's a relatively small market in the global sense. So, getting up to be on that leadership team and running that portfolio, the step was to take on a bigger business. So I'd had the idea of it, but not necessarily a clear view of what role and what country and what time. But I was just so fortunate that gave me a chance to be able to make that move.
And so then you sort of started those global doors, helping you do the global football from a global sales director, and sort of getting that world view of Nike as a business, which is a global business.
It was just a remarkable opportunity. I mean, you for someone, a young kid out of Melbourne in Australia, and you're there in Argentina at a Boca Juniors game and meeting with them, and then at that stage you had Manchester United and you're working with them, and then you're moving to Mexico or the Indian team. It was just such a fortunate opportunity to go and spend time and see what the passion that people have for sport and for their club and their team, and we're able to grow the business. And that was the first time that had a global operation behind football. So that was great, and I'd planned to do that 4 or 5 years, but in typical Nike way, 9 months, they said, "Hey, I know we've just moved you from Hong Kong, but we'd love to move you to Shanghai." And so, of course, your head's spinning because we thought we'd be on the in Portland at world headquarters for a long while. And I remember very vividly, I was in there talking with the CEO around 2010 World Cup in South Africa and the plans, and he said, "Hey, what do you think about China?" And I said, "Yeah, it's great business, and we think we can grow football there." And he said, "No, I want you to move." I said, "Well, okay." And he said, "But I've got a job for you." And I said, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" And he said, "Hey, I want you to move there, and I want you to open 5 new Nike stores." And I said, I think we can do that. We did that in Australia and in Asia, and no trouble. And over the course of the year, I think we'll get the right locations, and 5 in a year, I think will go well. And he said, no, 5 every day. And I said,
Oh, wow.
Sorry, I'm not sure I heard you properly. He said, "Yeah, I want you to find a way to open 5 new Nike stores every day." And I just couldn't get my head around that was the big problem doing that. Yeah, we had.
Well, that's amazing, and I guess just putting that challenge in front of you. Is it very much the Nike way of setting that bar really high and just expecting, just do it, so to speak?
Absolutely, and that's part of the culture that I really connected with, because big, bold challenge. How do you go and find a way to make it happen? And even the same as after being in China and running commercial in all the regions, my last job was back in Portland, looking after emerging markets. I was vice president of emerging markets commercial. It was 156 countries. And so trying to get your head around everything from South America, with Brazil being such an important part with the Olympics and World Cup there, all through up to Mexico, across Asia, into India, Bangladesh, etc., and then all of Africa as well. And so your mental stimulation to be able to work, and pick up the phone and having a conversation with someone in Brazil around their business and what they're trying to do, and then into Korea, and then into India, and to Australia, and then all of a sudden South Africa. Again, it was just such that Nike spirit of, yes, it's a big business. It was $5 billion US, but find a way to figure it out and grow it, and we'll have to do that.
There's a lot of businesses like Nike, but also in sport, that sort of bundle emerging markets in, his big growth opportunity, and everything sort of gets put in them. But like you said, there's different things culturally, different market forces at play. Was there a sort of a template or a playbook that you were sort of overlaying, each market, that you can sort of say, well, these are the key indicators that actually mean I can pull these levers? Like, how were you trying to sort of, I guess, get like for like, when a lot of the instances they weren't really like for like, but you sort of needed sort of guidebook or playbook to run each market?
Yeah, it's a good question, Sean. I mean, I think initially it's just hard to get your head around that, because you have very mature markets like in Australia or Korea, and then there was markets where we just took over the distributorship, like India, so this massive growth opportunity. So the good thing with Nike was so many different product categories and product types that you could tailor the product offering. But I think where I got to in the end is really there was always three things we wanted to do. One was get the team right. That was none of it. Two was make sure you spend enough time with the consumer and understand exactly what they want. And then third is give them a premium experience, in whatever premium looks like in that market. I generally think if you do those three things well, then 90% of the time the business will grow.
And so, being at Nike for 17 years, sort of coming back to Australia with that, I guess, that broad experience, was there a specific thing you were looking at, role or those kind of things, or, and also, bringing that breadth of experience of international markets, emerging markets, how to develop in markets? Was there anything particular looking when you were coming back, or what was your, reasoning and taking that next step?
Yeah, look, ideally, I actually didn't want to leave Nike. It's such an amazing company, great culture. They'd given me so many opportunities, but we had young kids, all under the age of 4. I was traveling 2 weeks out of 3, and of course, if you're going to go down to Brazil, it's a long way to go. Then you go to Argentina and Chile, and so most of those trips end up being 10, 12, 14-day trips, which was really hard on my wife and our family. And my next role would have been running the global business from a commercial point of view. So really it became one of those trade-off decisions, with our family. What kind of dad did I want to be? What kind of husband did I want to be? And so that meant that, after 8 or 9 years away, that we wanted to get back to Australia and have that supportive family around us. And we gave it 12 months, my wife Louise and I, and Louise has been incredible support throughout my journey. But we had that big grown-up conversation of let's get home and ideally try and find a great role. But we said, hey, if we don't, we get to 12 months, then maybe we get back and we buy a cafe and we just try to do something a little bit different. And so that was kind of the parachute that the safety net at the end of 12 months. But I was very enough to be able to get the CEO role of the Western Bulldogs, and that really is me in lots of ways. One, being a footy fan growing up, but two, getting into the AFL industry was something I'd aspired to do at some point in your career. And then third was, the Bulldogs being very much a challenger club and a challenger brand, and coming from Nike, who was the market leader and the one, to be able to go to a club that hadn't had a lot of on-field success in a long period of time, that was really trying to find their way in that crowded, AFL marketplace and trying to way to be successful on and off field. It really appealed to me a lot, and I was again very fortunate to have that opportunity.
And so what was it like? A lot of people in the AFL system and in clubland have been in clubland for a long time and worked their way up in the same way that you've done from Nike. There are, CEOs coming in from sort of outside, if you will. What were some of the, initial learnings and sort of understanding the AFL system, coming from, a global sports corporate like Nike?
Yeah, to be direct, I really underestimated in knowledge. Had 8 or 9 years being away from Australia, hadn't come up through the AFL system, and so the knowledge and the network I just didn't have. I guess probably, in hindsight, maybe a little naive, where you thought your skills would be very transferable, and certainly some of them were, but I just didn't have the network, the relationships, that many of those people did. So I was probably coming from a long way back in trying to get up to speed there, and had along the way too. But ultimately, it was an entertaining and inspiring experience, because it was this crazy ride of trying to learn a new industry, and first time in a professional sporting environment. Obviously, lots of sport connection with Nike, but in a high performance environment. And look, I was very, very proud of the success we had to be able to have play a small part in winning an AFL premiership for a long time. Since 1954 was the last premiership. To be able to have an AFLW team license and for that team to come in and be undefeated initially, to be able to break membership revenue records. I was incredibly proud of being able to play a small part in that journey. And there's some wonderful people across the Western Bulldogs, both from the board, executive players, etc. That it was an amazing ride and experience. I'll be forever in debt to that.
And so, like when I have discussed it or had guests on from AFL land, whether it be club land or working at the league, you did make the transition to go to the AFL. What was your remit when moving to the?
Yeah, look, when I was to leave the Bulldogs, and it was a shorter time frame than what originally I was thinking, but it was certainly the right move for me. Straight away I got it from Gil and Tooled, and it was a pretty simple brief. And they said, "Hey, we're thinking about the game in China. You used to work in China, didn't you? Hey, can you help us figure it out?" And that worked out pretty well. I had my own consulting business and very much, focused on being bold and those bigger was called Bold Works. And so really well. And so we're trying to figure this thing out. And I know you're across the China business, but, when you don't have grounds to play on, you've got people that have never even heard of the sport. It was a really big challenge because, you're a big in a small pond in Australia as the AFL. Then you go into China and you're a tiny, and so trying to figure out, what grounds to be able to play on, how to get a broadcast deal, how to sell tickets, all the 18 approvals that we needed to get, and again, full to Port Adelaide. I think David Koch, Keith Thomas, Andrew Hunter have just did a wonderful job in driving it from a club side, but as the league, you really needed to play a role. So lots of challenges and some crazy stories there to try and get that up, but ultimately to be able to play that game, and then there more years after that, and only really stopped because of COVID. It was amazing success, and to still see Port Adelaide, when you see their top 3 or 4 sponsors are all connected through China in some way. So I would have loved to have had more time doing that, but it was a great experience to come into the AFL head office.
And so in your role at the AFL, changed over time, both initially being that China project, but then again, sort of coming under the emerging markets. Hey, Dave, you've helped the markets. What could we do? But then also, I guess, a broader remit of that head of audiences. What did sort of, how did that role change? But what did that role end up being in that audiences? What did that mean?
Yeah, look, I think, again, great culture within the AFL that, the eyes were always open to those new opportunities of growth. And so was China, then India, and then it was, hey, international, how do we get that going? Then it was new products, how can we develop up, new products? But ultimately it was all audience growth. And so that in a few ways, there was a multicultural component to that. Hence, China and India, 2 biggest countries from a population point of view internationally, but also the diaspora here in Australia. And the AFL hadn't necessarily had a great connection into those communities. And then it was picking up marketing and PR and new products, and really a way to how do you get people in the funnel. And so big focus on New South Wales and Queensland, but really just kept growing and growing and growing. And so whether it is from Auskick, and I think, Alistair Dobson and the team did a great job on reworking Auskick, but really looking for ways in which we could ultimately progress through. And my last role in the AFL was GM of operations, and it was a really amazing experience to have such a broad.
I mean, it is probably with the AFL being both the league and the organising body for the sport. So you're not only looking at how does the league run, how does the women's league run, but then also all grassroots from Auskick and up. It does give you a lot to do, and I guess widen that funnel.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's great about that culture was it was what it takes to get things done. And so I really ended up having a reputation to be able to solve complex problems. That's ultimately, in layman's terms, that's really what my role was. So whether it was complex problems on playing a game in China or figuring out grow a fan base, how to lead in the COVID issues that we had there. And that we feel fortunate to be able to have that opportunity that Gil and say, hey, we've got COVID happening. Hey, can you try and figure out what we're going to do with that? And so to be able to pull together a team, it was pretty challenging on return to play and how do you get crowds back. And then, hey, we're not going to be able to play the grand final at the MCG. So, Dave, can you go and figure out what we do? And that was kind of the brief in a lot of these things that, a huge trust from Gil and the team to be able to then go and figure out a process that how do you sell a grand final to another state. And so I was fortunate enough to lead that with Queensland and WA and then go and execute it, but also the freedom to create new things. And one of the things I'm most proud about in my time at the AFL was Gather Round, and to be able to come up with that idea and have 6 or 7 months of people saying no, way through, then to be able to one by one overcome those challenges and ultimately deliver something that's been an incredible success. It's something I look back on with incredible pride.
So in May 2023, you were announced as the CEO of the NBL. How did that come about? Was it something you were looking for? Was it a shoulder from Larry Kesselman and Jeremy? How did that role and that move come about?
It was actually. It was started in the January of that year. I was actually fortunate enough to be invited to a lunch by the Victorian Sports Minister, Steve Demopoulos, with a whole lot of other senior leaders in sport. And Larry was there. And I'd never met Larry before. I'd obviously heard a bit about him. Jeremy was a good friend of mine. So I'd been across basketball, and I'm a passionate basketball fan as well, but been to plenty of games. And just over this lunch with 10 or 12 other people, he said, "Hey, I'd love to catch up for a coffee with you." And he said, "Yeah, great, no trouble." So we had a coffee, and he said, "Hey, look, I'm thinking about making some changes in the L and putting in a CEO. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Well, look, I'm actually really happy at the AFL. I've got this thing called Gather Round coming up. It's been my baby for a long while." So I'm really quite comfortable where I am. And we had a few more chats and in the end, decided to come across. But it was really important for me to be able to see Gather Round through. So Larry, typical way, "Hey, can we get you started? Let's get going in March." And I said, "Look, I really want to make sure that we deliver Gather Round." And so really getting knowing the NBL, for me, it was a lot about the why. First and foremost, I get a lot of energy from those bigger growth opportunities, and seeing Larry's optimism and ambition in the NBL was really encouraging. 2, you don't often get a chance to be able to be CEO of a league, and so that's a huge privilege that I felt. And 3, just where I was in my career, to be able to get back into that CEO role, to be able to lead a team, to drive your own culture, and then also combine that international component of the sport, which is obviously a lot more prevalent in basketball than what it is in the AFL. It all added up to the say yes.
So I mean, the NBL, we've mentioned Larry a few times. Larry Kesselman, if for those who don't know, is driving the NBL. It's a very different, I guess, business and also its clubs is very different from AFL land, which is club owned and member driven. Ownership is a big driving of what the NBL does and what it does with its clubs. Was that a bit of a mind shift and a bit of a change for you coming from the AFL?
Yeah, it was a real shift, and I think there was a couple of elements, that were different. Is firstly, you come to the AFL that owns all the components of the whole sport. So from grassroots in Auskick to participation through to the men's league, the women's league, through to the media platforms, everything is done through that one organisation. And then you come to basketball, and a very, very fragmented industry. We've got the men's league, but didn't have the women's, didn't have Basketball Australia doing a lot in the space, the State Basketball Association doing a lot of activities in Australia and New Zealand. Got a whole lot of private businesses. So big shift to run from the whole league and the whole ecosystem to now only having the one men's league. So that was a big shift. The private ownership was also a big shift. So when you're member owned, as all the clubs are in the AFL, to then going to private ownership with high net worth individuals, that's a really big shift in the way that they see success, the way that they look at their role as custodians of that club, and the way we have as custodians of the league. It was a really big shift, but it's been amazing. I've absolutely loved it. Speak highly enough of both Larry and the team here at the NBL, but also the club owners and their teams. It's been a significant challenge and lots of bumps along the way, but I'm really proud of the results that we've been able to deliver, particularly over the last year and a half.
You describe yourself as someone that solves complex problems. Coming into the NBL, there's not complex problems there, but you're still trying to maintain that growth trajectory. What have been some of the things that you've had to tackle to sort of keep the NBL on an upward path? Because it's not like you were coming in as a fixer-upper, hey, we need to correct things. Larry and Jeremy had it on a really strong path, and you've got, committed owners of teams wanted to continue the growth. What were some of the remit to say, hey, Dave, this is what we want you to focus on?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. You're absolutely right. I think Larry, Jeremy, Vince and the team, they've done a phenomenal job. So it certainly wasn't a turnaround brief. But there was really three things that were my big priorities. Firstly was this idea of unifying sport. As I said, we're very fragmented as a sport. So one of the most biggest priorities for me is how do we get sport working together? So spent a lot of time with Matt Scriven and the Basketball Australia team, a lot of time with the States, a lot of time with the NBA, and that really came to in the Hoops Fest concept that we're able to announce, and we're excited for that to execute in September in Perth, where the whole sport comes together. So you've got WNBL plus NBL. So you've got the elite, you've got community as well, with 48 teams playing the under-18 Australian Championships. You've also got the off-court culture piece with Sneakerland, and that's a unique part of our sport. And then you'll see some announcements over the coming weeks, but the NBA component will also be a part of Hoops Fest. So it was a big priority. How do you get the whole sport to work together? And that extended it into the clubs as well. And so a lot bigger connection with the clubs to be able to make sure that the sum of the parts is better than everyone individually. The second big priority was to continue the growth journey. Again, when you're coming off 30% and 20% growth, it's really hard because you've got to anniversary that growth. And again, we're not really a business that just wants to stay flatline, and I'm not a leader who gets excited about flatlining the business. So, very aggressive goals. How do we take our broadcast audience and grow it by 30%? How do you grow your social media? How do you grow attendance? And I was really proud of the fact that we had 26% growth in our broadcast coming off the back of a number of years of 20 and 30% growth. We had a 50% growth in our social media. We had 40 sellouts, a staggering number of those, the highest attendance we've had in history on a per game basis, and the second highest on total. First time in 20 years, in 25 years, to be able to get over 1 million people through the gate. So that was the biggest focus from the business side, is how do you get growth on top of growth, and again, fantastic there. And then the third part is, how do you set the table for future growth opportunities? And so looking at those new products, I mentioned Hoops Fest, WNBL, has been something that's been a big priority. And so I was pleased to be able to play a leadership role in getting that WNBL deal done, working closely with an incredible leader like Robin Denholm and Basketball Australia with John Matt. Have a look at new growth opportunities like Harlem Globetrotters that we've just finished, well over 100,000 people going to those games. So it's thinking about those new product opportunities, and that was really the third biggest.
I mean, yeah, you've covered a lot there in adding the dub to the remit and getting the men's and women's aligned and sort of giving you a bit more piece of the basketball pie, but unifying piece. I wanted to talk about, I guess, the work that has been done and continues to be done around the NBL and the NBA. I think the internationalization of basketball is sort of in phase two. Phase one was, the dream team and sharing the NBA with the world. We've now got it going the other way with the world, coming to the NBA with more players internationally. And the NBL is a big part of that with multiple drafted. How important is to position the NBL as, a super strong league and a pathway to the NBA?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's for us. I think historically, whenever you mention NBL and NBA in the same sentence, we see that as a big benefit. But what now has happened is we've now got multiple strategies with how we connect those two organisations. So again, and again, congratulations to Larry and Jeremy on the team. First of all, having those games with NBL teams going over to play against NBA, to see Adelaide 36ers, Phoenix Suns, a couple of years ago, just incredible moments. The Next Stars program has been an incredible success. To have 4 of our players drafted a couple of weeks ago in the NBA draft, including Alex Sarr as the number 2. And to think about it, a 7-foot kid from France goes to high school in the US, then decides the best way for him to get to the NBA is to go to the NBL and end up in Perth, Australia. That's pretty remarkable. And he didn't start on those draft boards as anywhere near that the top 5 pick. But through his experience in the NBL, to be able to get to that number 2 pick is amazing. And third, now had players who have gone directly from the NBL to the Jack McVeigh a couple of days ago. Another one that'll hopefully, if he gets to play, the 34th player, that shows that we're a legitimate pathway for those players, whether they're Australian or international. And then that next component, all of those other products. So, when I talk about Hoops Fest, and there'll be a good NBA involvement there, it's no secret that we've been exploring ideas for an NBA team to come out to Australia. So building those connections there. And then lastly is also helping in that development of Asian talent. And particularly when we spend time with the NBA, one of their big insights that they've shared with us is their role is very much around creating heroes. And who are those next heroes that have come out of Asia and region? And we all saw the power that Yao Ming had in the NBA. And so they've asked for our help on how can we help in the development of those players. So we've now got a multi-pronged strategy with how we build that great connection with the NBA. And I can't speak highly enough about the partnership and the spirit of collaboration that they've had from Adam Silver down.
And is that a part of, when you've got those growth metrics of 20, 30% year on year, like Australia and New Zealand is a limited amount of people, but the appetite for NBA content and NBA content, whether it be draft, the fact that people are watching high school and, the amount of people watching Summer League now, it sort of puts the NBL in that mix that there are now US fans who are tuning in, following the NBL on social. I spoke to the Illawarra Hawks, and they were talking about, the million views when LaMelo Ball was playing. We've had Josh Giddey playing here, Alex Sarr. Like, is it, again, just further opening up that audience, but internationally for the NBL?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've now got more people watching the NBL outside of Australia than we do inside of Australia. I mean, that's remarkable, and I'm sure there's other sports in Australia that have that. And critical to that has been how do we connect with those people? And so to be able to have this last season finished was the first time we've had every single NBL game on ESPN in the States. Again, I think Kylie Watson-Wheeler and the ESPN team have been phenomenal partners to help us with that. But that's opened up so much of an opportunity. The work that Nicola and our team have done, international growth with Next Stars on, signing a Kenny Smith to be an ambassador on our Next Stars program, a Carmelo Anthony, Vince and the team have had a lot of time connecting in with the US, and it's been phenomenal. And so we've now got relevance in that market. It's not just the novelty of a league in Australia, but they've seen now these players like a Josh Giddey come through the NBL and Alex Sarr, as you said. So we think we're only scratching the surface, that opportunity, and there's both US and the time zones work reasonably well for us in some of those markets. Europe is another big opportunity, and given how many of our Next Stars are coming out of Europe. And then the third one is Asia. And again, the role that Australian basketball plays within Asia is very high, as you've seen by the success of the Boomers and the Opals and the Rollers, etc. And so therefore we're an aspirational league. So a lot of those players in Asia see that the path for them to be their best is through the NBL. And again, with the time zone, And with the size of that market, when you think about China, there's 350 million basketball fans in China. So if we can start to look at those opportunities, then I think that'll help us plan for that next phase of growth for the NBL.
The WNBL was recently announced that the NBL is going to, I guess, take it on, drive the marketing and drive the promotion of it. I was lucky enough to work with Jeremy in that first days of the NBL and their role in it, and a lot of what's happening. Who's this new number? Because there's so much change happened. What can WNBL fans expect when, I guess, you turn your marketing efforts and your operational efforts to the NBL to bring it to the standard that you want it to be?
Yeah, I think the first part I would say as a precursor on WNBL is we just haven't done the diligence yet to understand the opportunities and the challenges. So a big part of my leadership style is I want to go out, meet people and listen to fans and listen to players and clubs and stakeholders. So we've got to do a lot of that. So I don't want to be too quick to get into solution mode, but again, when you think about the opportunities that we can see in WNBL, is the on-court is fantastic, and the way that the seasons work when you've got WNBA players, whether they're Australian or international, coming to play in the WNBL, that's really unique. So we always want to get the product right and have the best possible talent on court. Two is the strength of the clubs. And again, I think seemingly the clubs have done a really good job, but how can we help them take some big steps forward in terms of building their brand and their profile and their fans? Third is that game experience. And I think being one of the great success stories of the NBL, everyone who you have come along to an NBL game just loves it. There's a great family and entertainment. So we want to be able to elevate that third. And then the fourth would probably be just with partners, whether they're commercial partners, broadcasters, governments, venues, stakeholders. Again, I'm a big believer in how we get the whole ecosystem to work together. And it's not just going to be our team that has the secret sauce that all of a sudden, turns things, from here to there overnight. But it's really, how do I get the whole ecosystem working? And having incredible leaders like Robin, and the my team, as well as Larry and our team here, I've got big confidence that we'll take some steps forward. It's not going to happen overnight, but we know that we want all of those fans, those players, those clubs to be able to have a continually a better experience.
I mean, I definitely think both the product on the floor in the players, but then also product off the floor from a fan's point of view. Talking to MJ at the Kings hey, this is what we want the Kings game to be. We want it to be like for like with an NBA game, or even better. That helps with everything from a broadcast point of view, getting people in, like getting that lift, and having people have a known experience is really important. And I think it's exciting for WNBL to be able to take that as well, and because that's sort of what the fans are crying out for, and it will be it'll allow you to keep on the same trajectory that women's sport is going on, both here and internationally.
Absolutely, and that's why I think using a bit of the experience of fortunate enough to playing a role in the development of the AFLW is, I think what we also have to be careful is, what we don't want to do is just copy and paste from the men's and assume that everything that works in the men's is all of a sudden going to work in the women's. It's got to be a different product. It's going to be played in different environments, different venues. We don't know all those answers as yet, but what we do need to make sure it's a very tailored plan, not copy and paste.
And so, for those who haven't been to a NBL game or a WNBL game, what do you hope that they should be expecting as they go to a game, or potentially they're going to Hoops Fest in Perth in September?
Yeah, look, what we really love is for that 2 hours to be the best 2 hours of a family's week. And that's a really easy thing to say, a little harder to do, but we're unashamedly focused on families, much focused on entertainment, so that, of course, the on-court product is important, but the whole entertainment experience is going to be fun for families. It's a great opportunity for them to be together, and regardless of how their teams perform, we want to make sure that after that couple of hours that they walk with smiles on their faces, they've had a great time, they've seen some quality basketball, and they're richer for the experience. And again, really broad terms, but ultimately what we're about. We're very deliberately not just focused on basketball because we know that there's lots of other elements that fans and particularly families are looking for. With the team that we've got now and people like Anthony Everard coming across from running the BBL, Richardson, who's worked in a number of other sports as well. We feel like we've now got the level of talent across the organisation combined with great leadership to be able to help us take that next step and continue that growth trajectory.
Most definitely. A lot of those names you've mentioned, Anthony, Vince, Jeremy, they've all been on the podcast, so I vouch for them all. So it's a good indicator. To the Sports Geek closing five, really do appreciate you taking the time today. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
Yes, I do. It was actually a Melbourne Demons game. My parents weren't big into sport, and so we had a friend who used to drive from Mount Martha, where they lived, to pick up in Ringwood, drive all the way into the city, and saw a Demons game at the MCG, and I was blown away by the size and scale of thing. And I think we're about 4 rows from the back, but it was just one of the best days of my life.
Amazing. You would have been to a lot of sports events in your time in sport, whether it be at Nike or at the AFL. Do you have a favourite food memory or a go-to food at an event?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, look, I think one of the most unique experiences was going to the World Cup final in Brazil and to be able to see the energy that happened there was just remarkable. And I remember you go along the game and you think someone will pass you a hot dog or a beer and a big group, and they pass down some beers. And then there was basically a steak that was wrapped around in serviette, and that was passed down. And so you were sort of having this steak in your hand plus a beer, watching a World Cup final. It was pretty.
It's going to be very the World Cup in the US. I don't know if you saw the Copa America final in Miami Hard Rock Stadium with the fervour of fans trying to get in, some without tickets and through air vents. The fervour of the football fan is something that some people are actually worried that I don't know if America's ready for. I've never seen fans trying to get in through an air conditioning vent, but football fans are a special kind of fan, I think.
Absolutely. I was lucky enough to go to a Boca Juniors versus River Plate game at Boca Stadium in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And I remember vividly that they only, because of the issues they've had with violence, is they only let home team fans in. They don't have any away team. And there was someone who wasn't cheering as loud for Boca Juniors, and so they were questioning whether or not this guy was actually a River Plate fan. And so they went over to him and they were asking him, they were hassling him, and they got him to get out his license to be able to see where he lived, to be able to show that, whether he was on the River Plate area or Boca. So there's incredible passion there.
And it's going to be interesting. I think Steve Ballmer has got a specific section of seats in his new stadium that's supposedly just meant to be for Clipper fans. So I don't know how they're going to adjudicate that, but I could see Steve Ballmer checking licenses as they sit down. He's that fanatical. Working in a league, things have time, and also working in global markets. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Always the NBL app. I want to be able to see what the latest news is, and then I would jump on to ESPN after that and look at what's happening globally in the NBA, and then third would be Fox Sports, the local domestic news.
Is there someone that the podcast listeners should follow? Might be someone that you follow, whether it be an author or a colleague that they should follow, and why?
Oh, that's a great question. I tell you who would be someone very, very random, but a guy called Kevin Carroll. He was in Nike when I was there, and he's just one of these incredible storytellers and got a great way about helping people connect and work together and really finding your purpose. And I found him to being an inspirational.
Well, one of my constant is Phil Knight's Shoe Dog, which tells the story of Nike. When anyone asks me for a recommendation, I always pass that one on.
Yeah, he's an incredible human being. Yeah, he's an incredible human being. He's he was. I was fortunate enough to spend a bit with him at Nike, and some funny stories, a little eccentric, but just one of those incredible leaders that you feel so fortunate to have spent some time with.
And lastly, you can answer this personally, and then you can potentially put your NBL hat on. But what social media platform is your MVP?
Well, it's a great. I don't spend a lot of time on social media, so it's probably LinkedIn. I find there's some great insights, including many of yours as well, and Joe over in the US. I get some great updates there, but that's generally where I spend most of my time from a social media point of view.
And what's the platform that's the one popping off the most from the NBL point of view?
Yeah, look, ours TikTok is still going unbelievably well, but probably Instagram. You know, we've seen X or Twitter drop off a fair bit, and obviously Facebook's a little older for our target market. So Instagram continues to grow on, and the stories and functionality that you can see there, particularly for our global market. That's the one that continues to drive good growth along with TikTok.
Definitely. Well, I'll have links to all of those NBL properties in the show notes. Dave, I really do appreciate you coming on the podcast. If people who have listened and want to reach out and say, I really enjoyed the chat, is LinkedIn the best way for people to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm very fortunate to have had an incredible career in sports, but there's lots of people who have helped me along the way. And so I'm very passionate about development and helping. I think if people want to reach out, I'd love to be able to help them on their journey in the way that I was fortunate enough to be helped along mine.
Well, thanks a lot. All the best for the season ahead, and all the best for Hoops Fest to kick things off in September.
Great. Thanks, Sean. And again, well done to you. You're an incredible resource for the whole sports industry, and we're very, very fortunate to have you. So thank you very much.
Cheers, mate.